Jim.
It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when I'm like this. I got my head in the zone, you know. I'm on the Morning Star Drive, you know.
Hey guys, how's it going? It's Tuesday, April 5th, and this is the Morning Star Drive on 117.8. We're on YouTube, so make sure to subscribe, follow us on SoundCloud, and make sure to support us on Patreon. So what is happening on this wonderful Tuesday? We've got some current news from around the world, looking into the life of Apostle John, and thoughts of the week on personal finance. All right, guys, how are you doing? Yes, Monday is officially in the books. It is Tuesday once again, and I'm super thankful for all of you guys joining us here on the Morning Star Drive. So keep liking and commenting, and I want to hear from you guys, see how you're doing. We need to build the community for this English Providence ministry, and I hope that a lot of us can connect with each other too. Thank you so much for all the people that are always commenting and liking these podcasts, but more than anything else, I hope that we can just kind of open up a space for English Provi people, right? Where, you know, this is a public channel, so even when people look at this channel, they're not going to be thinking, this is so weird kind of thing. They're going to be like, wow, these people are normal and like really cool people, so, you know, there's nothing different about them too. So I hope that we can build this community more and more each and every day and each and every week. You know, we're already into like 540, 536 different podcasts, and I hope that you guys have been joining them. Thank you so much for your comments and the encouragement. So what is happening over here? My nephew just arrived yesterday. Well, the whole family did. My cousin, his wife, and they got two sons, right? One is like 11 months and one is like 4.5. Well, no, he's turning 5 next week, so we're gonna have a big birthday party for him too, but super happy about that. But it's been crazy. Sunday night they came in like Sunday afternoon. They're supposed to come like late night around like 7-8 p.m. But they ended up coming to our house around before 4 p.m. and it was nuts. Like, I'm talking crazy. This 4 or 5-year-old is just like, of course, I am the favorite uncle by far. But he is just like games and games, and we're playing like Marvel superheroes and Fortnite, but we're not even like, this is how crazy it is. We're not even playing the games. We're not even watching the movies. We are pretending, right? We are pretending that we are Marvel heroes and people on Fortnite. I've never played Fortnite before, but they're like, he's like, yeah, so you get this sword, and he starts giving me this entire story. I have no idea what he's talking about, and then we just fight, right? And I'm going to tell you this, guys, as crazy as this sounds, they came in around 4 p.m., and they left around 8:30, 9 p.m., right? The only break we had was dinner. That's it. That was the only break. So I was exhausted this morning just playing with this kid all night. And, you know, I love him to death. He's going to come over again. He's going to come over again, like, pretty soon. Like, I would say within the next hour or so. So if you, like, all of a sudden hears some kid screaming in the background, that's going to be my nephew at my door, like banging the door and asking, "Play, come on, when are we going to play games? When are we going to play games?" So yeah, he's a nutty little kid. I love him to death, but super thankful. Like, there was a Canucks game last night. Couldn't even watch it because we're fighting on the ground and he's hiding in the plants and stuff like that. So it's just too cute though, because he's my nephew. I'm only going to see him for another week, so hopefully gonna have a good time with that too. You know, someone was bringing up this comment too about the messages for the last 3-4 weeks, or ever since I've been thinking about this ever since we had the messages coming only from head leaders on Sunday. The level has changed, right? No, I'm not saying level is lowered. It's just, I think my thinking is Sunstream is even more on point, more like praying even more deeper right now, that I can't imagine what these messages would be like if Sunstein preached, because he's just like point after point is really powerful messages coming out. And I think because Sunstein knows that he's not delivering it, he has to be even more precise, right? He has to be even more powerful receiving these messages. And I know that everyone's talking about how great the messages are. So can you imagine how much Sunstein prayed and how much Sunstein is doing just to get these messages out. And it's kind of like last week's message. It's like, if we understood how much God was doing for us just to give us this world and universe, how long it took. Think about, in the same way in a miniaturized scale, how long, how much effort, how much sweat and tears is Sunstein pouring in just to give us these powerful messages that are like, think about it, they're like 30 minutes every week on Sundays and Wednesdays. It's super short, but it's so impactful. So I was thinking about that, like, wow, Sunstein, you must be working overtime just to get these messages out. So I'm really, really hoping that as we pray more and more, we'll really pray for God to fix the situation that's happening with all the slander and stuff like that too, so things can go back to, not even back to normal, like to reach the next level. And I think one of the things that Sunstein does talk about in the past is, he says, tribulations and hardships come so that, it's like a boat in the calm ocean doesn't really move, but once there's storms, winds, and waves, it's really scary and dangerous, but the boat flies towards the destination, right? So I'm hoping that the bigger this tribulation is, the better it's going to be in the future, where we're just going to explode. So that's something I'm really hoping for. I don't know what you guys are thinking. Go ahead, leave a comment below. Would love to hear what you think about the situation too when it comes to the last 3 to 4 weeks of Sunday messages. We do have a new talk on Thursday night. I didn't check what it was yet, but we're going to have a new video Thursday night. And I do believe yesterday I posted a new YouTube short. So another YouTube short is coming out. It came out yesterday too. So we're twice a week. One's going to be a YouTube short and one's going to be an actual video. So I'm super happy about that one there too. And, we have our editing team that's just working around the clock in this one also. Also, this week's Sunday edition, remember, it's Ivy Zermata from Brazil. Our first member we're interviewing from Brazil. Go ahead and check that out. It's an awesome interview. We're learning about her journey into this history. Super fun. And it's great to meet people from other countries that we have no idea about. Like, we don't know much about Brazil Providence, but we get to meet Ivy. So I'm super happy about that. So make sure, check out this week's Sunday edition. All right. So let's get this show started on the road with some member artists from around the world. And today's featured artist is a favorite, just recently came up. It's AG from Japan. He's on SoundCloud, AG at SOL, which is Sounds of Love. He's got trance, hip-hop, all these other different ones. We're going to go back to his Holy Spirit, I Like You, I Love You, SID remix. Hope you guys really enjoy. He's our featured artist and newest artist that we've seen from Providence. So you guys it's going to be an amazing, I can't wait to listen to that song again. And then we'll have Manning Groom from Paper Music Associates in Korea with Cold Summer. And then we'll end things off with the Rapture Collective from Australia with the song All My Thanks and Love.
여름철만 다가오면 기대되는 휴가 여름철만 다가오면 짜증나는 더위 끈적끈적한 여름엔 필요해 차가운 아이스크림 같은 한 여름밤의 꿈 빨리 안 먹으면 녹아서 끈적끈적해져 like hot summer with mosquito 뜨거운 여름만 다가오면 싫지만 괜스레 두근대는 이 기분은 뭘까 요즘 비가 오면 듣는 빗소리가 좋아 요즘 짝을 찾는 매미 소리도 좋아 시끄러운 매미 소리 밑에 가려진 매미들의 숨가쁜 사랑 노래 괜스레 얼굴이 빨개져 뜨거운 태양처럼 이젠 기대돼 다가올 여름이
여름밤은 너무 더워 우릴 살려줘 열대야가 우릴 삼켜서 we will go 집에서 에어컨은 냉방병 걸려 갈 사람 저요 갈 사람 너요 여름밤은 너무 더워 우릴 살려줘 열대야가 우릴 삼켜서 we will go 집에서 에어컨은 냉방병 걸려 갈 사람 저요 갈 사람 너요
끝에 조금 처해지는 핫서머데이 떠나볼까 젊은 날에 좋은 자리 있으면 좀 잡아도 꽉 막힌 도로여도 오늘은 기분이 설레네 계획은 딱히 없고 몇 시간 달린 후에 바닷가에 시원하게 발부터 담가 붙잡고 파도를 삼켜 또 모래성을 쌓아 석양 아래 바다 와 모래알이 너무 예쁜걸 느새 떠윈 잊었고 굳이 여자 없이 우리끼리도 즐겁네 그래도 저기 걸어오는 너희는 너무나 예쁜 거 아쉬움 뒤로 한 채 우리 내년에 기약하자고
여름밤은 너무 더워 우릴 살려줘 열대야가 우릴 삼켜서 we will go 집에서 에어컨은 냉방병 걸려 갈 사람 저요 갈 사람 너요 여름밤은 너무 더워 우릴 살려줘 열대야가 우릴 삼켜서 we will go 집에서 에어컨은 냉방병 걸려 갈 사람 저요 갈 사람 너요
Yeah, welcome to God's new history. Daily preaching, the Bible no longer a mystery. Saving lives, taking action, what a wonderful destiny. Working tirelessly and we can become heavenly. All I ever wanted for you is to see we can become one with the Trinity. A condition was set by His highest. Confess and pray, create a new mindset. If you follow until the end, I promise you, you will surely realize God's divineness.
He's divine, yo. Alpha and Omega, He's divine. Yeah. So let's reflect on the past. You gotta look deeply at the things God has done. Salvation at the highest has been granted. That's a blessing of blessings, the Lord's mandate. Spring water the hills faster than a band-aid. COVID safe cause His eyes was on us like a magnet. Got the seal on our foreheads, yet they can't do nothing. The devil and his gang have been disbanded.
So I raise my praise to you. So I lift my hands up high. Even in my weakness, even in my struggles, I'll always give my thanks and love. All my thanks and love.
Got so many bars that I never lose signal. Keeping it lit like a candlelight vigil. Lamp to my feet and a lighter to my palm. God's word is my perspective, the righteous collective. Filtering pollution, being mentally selective. Guarding the heart, it's a protective. Do it in a new way, in spirit and physicality. Do it in a new way, take it higher, raise a level. Giving God glory, God's love is the story. So rich in His love, feeling like a rich miser. Love is exploding like a geyser. Love so contagious, spread across the world like Pfizer. Antidote of the nation.
Reflect on the past, you gotta look deeply at the things God has done. Salvation at the highest has been granted. That's a blessing of blessings, the Lord's mandate. Spring water the hills faster than a band-aid. COVID safe cause His eyes was on us like a magnet. Got the seal on our foreheads, yet they can't do nothing. The devil and his gang have been
So
disbanded.
I raise my praise to you. So I lift my hands up high. Even in my weakness, even in my struggles, I'll always give my thanks and love. All my thanks and love.
And there you have it. That is a Rapture Collective from Australia with All My Thanks and Love. Before that, Man and Groom from the Paper Music Associates in Korea with Cold Summer. And of course, featured artist of the day, that is AG from Japan. Great song. There's no lyrics, but it's awesome. Holy Spirit, I Like You, I Love You. That's the SID remix. Anyone out there know what SID means? There's I saw there's EDM. We know what that is, right? And then, trance and house, but I'm not sure what SID is. So if anyone knows what type of music that is, go ahead and leave it in the comments below, okay? So let's get into the news going on around the world. And of course, yes, happy news is there's no more coronavirus updates. It's not necessary anymore. All the numbers are really low. Yes, cases are high in some countries, but still, daily death rates are very, very low, all right? So let's start off with some recap of what happened in the last 24 hours with the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Obviously there were shocking images of bodies of civilians in the streets of Bucha near Kyiv, and they have led to an outpouring of international condemnation of Russia. U.S. President Biden calls Putin a war criminal and says he should face trial over the incidents, and Ukraine's President Zelensky, on a visit to Bucha, accuses Russian forces of committing genocide. The BBC has seen further evidence of civilian killings near Kyiv, a shallow grave where 4 people allegedly shot dead by Russian forces were buried. Reporters have also seen the bodies of 5 men in a basement in Bucha who had their hands bound. Now, Downing Street says the attacks on civilians are barbaric and that the UK will push forward on more sanctions and military aid. Now, Germany, which relies heavily on Russian gas, says it is working towards an embargo on Russian energy but won't act immediately. Russia says it rejects all allegations and is claiming videos have been faked without providing any evidence, right? So for us guys, I think that is something that's kind of the stance we need to take on this is we don't know what's going on. We don't know what is true or false yet, and we have to wait to see what God does in this situation. I honestly have a very hard time trusting all the news outlets too. So let's see what happens. That's what the news is going out right now, but let's not be quick to condemn. We don't know what happens in politics, and politics is a lot scarier and a lot more I'm not sure what devious, that's the word. It's a lot more devious than we think, right? So I look at it with a grain of salt, and it's like, wow, that's terrible that happened, but let's see what does it actually mean. So, yes, lots of international condemnation. U.S. President Joe Biden called Vladimir Putin to face trial over war crimes in Ukraine. Ukrainian president visited the town of Bucha, speaking with residents and accusing Russia of genocide. UK Foreign Secretary Liz Truss pledged a tough new wave of sanctions on Russia. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the EU was ready to send investigators to document atrocities. Germany expelled 40 Russian envoys but rejected an embargo on energy imports from the country. The Kremlin repeated denials that Russia forces have killed civilians. So yeah, Germany actually expelled 40 Russian envoys after they watched the Bucha killings. Well, they didn't actually see it. It's just what the results are. And more international reaction is coming in after the emerging atrocities in Ukraine show new evidence of civilian killings allegedly by Russian military. Germany has expelled the 40 Russian envoys over the atrocities in Bucha near Ukraine's capital Kyiv and said further measures with allies are being prepared, local news is reporting. Now, Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock added that Berlin would also boost its support to Ukraine's armed forces. So that is kind of what we're catching up on what's happening over there with the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Let's go over to Hungary. And we're seeing a lot of elections are happening around the world. Hungary elections, Viktor Orban's hails victory in the Hungary elections. Hungary nationalist Prime Minister Viktor Orban has been congratulated by Russian President Putin after he won a 4th term by a landslide in the country's general election. His right-wing Fidesz party had 67.8% of votes, with almost 99% counted. The opposition alliance led by Peter Marchese was far behind with 28.1%. The Kremlin says Putin expressed confidence that the two countries could develop develop further ties despite the difficult international situation. And Orban, in his victory speech, criticized Brussels bureaucrats and Ukraine's Zelensky, calling them opponents. Zelensky has repeatedly criticized Orban's ban on the transfer of arms to Ukraine, with which it shares a border. Now, based on preliminary results, the National Election Office said Fidesz would have 135 seats, a two-thirds majority, and the opposition alliance would have 56 seats. The victory will be Fidesz's fourth successive win since 2010. And Mr. Orban, 58, has had a fraught relationship with the EU, which considers that Fidesz has undermined Hungary's democratic institutions. The BBC in Budapest says that while Hungary has welcomed more than 500,000 refugees from Ukraine and has joined EU sanctions on Russia, Orban has been cautious in his criticism of Moscow and insists that there should be no attempt to block the sale of Russian gas and oil to Europe. Several other EU countries, including Germany and Austria, are also wary of sanctioning Russian fuel, and Orban can be expected to seek their support for his position, correspondents add. In Costa Rica, new election, new president for a newcomer. Okay, so economist Rodrigo Chavez won the presidential election in Costa Rica. Preliminary results suggest the 60-year-old ran on a promise of shaking up traditional party politics in the Central American nation. With almost all votes counted, he had a lead of more than 5 percentage points over ex-president Jose Maria Figueres. Turnout was the lowest in decades as voters expressed discontent with Costa Rica's struggling economy. Jose Maria Figueres, who ran for a second term as president after having held the top job from 94 to 98, admitted defeat once his rival's lead had become too big to overcome. Many Costa Ricans said they were looking for a break with the politicians of the past, a trend which went against Mr. Figueres, who comes from one of the country's most influential political families. While Chavez is not entirely new to politics, he did serve in the outgoing government of President Carlos Alvarado as economy minister for 6 months, and he has emphasized his plan to break with what he calls privileges of Costa Rica's established political parties. Supporters of Chavez took to the streets of the capital, San Jose, to celebrate the candidate's win, and one of those celebrating told Reuters news agency that there was a hunger for real change in Costa Rica, and they need new faces to save the country, the man said. So there's some more elections going on, so we'll keep you up to date with that, which is a really, really big thing, especially when it comes to whenever something talks about spiritual things or things happening in the world. One of the big signs is when there are a lot of political hands that change, right? And that happened even in 1978. All right, so that's the top 3 news for news going around the world, which leads us into some sporting news. Yes, there was a game last night. The Vancouver Canucks played the Vegas Knights, and they are competing for a playoff spot, but I couldn't watch most of it because my nephew was playing with me, but we lost in overtime. So basically, we needed to beat them in regular time, which means the chances of making the playoffs is like 1%. It's so low, right? So we, basically everyone in Vancouver is kind of like, we'll wait for next year. So we're really not too happy about this. We play Vegas again on Tuesday, but yeah, that's what's happening. Some other Canadian teams around the league doing well. We have Ottawa defeating the Detroit Red Wings at 5-2, and big one was the Edmonton Oilers defeating the Minnesota Wild 6-1. Connor McDavid, remember that name, 1 goal, 2 assists. Leon Draisaitl, also the second best player on the team, scores his 50th goal and has 100 points already. McDavid's already like 105 points, but he's leading the league. But these two players are just phenomenal, and now they're basically, it looks like they have a good lead for that third position in. So I think no matter what, they're going to make the playoffs. Edmonton will. It's just a matter if they're going to be third place or in the wild card. In NBA news, big slate of games. Boston Celtics defeat the Washington Wizards 144-102. So that's a 42-point game, which is ridiculous. Jaylen Brown, 32.7 rebounds, 5 assists. Dallas Mavericks on the hunt, defeat the Milwaukee Bucks 118-112. Luka Doncic with 32 points, 8 rebounds, 15 assists. Denver Nuggets defeat the LA Lakers without LeBron James, 129-118. Nikola Jokic, 38 points, 18 rebounds, 6 assists. Philadelphia 76ers defeat the Cleveland Cavaliers 112-108. Joel Embiid with 44 points, 17 rebounds, and 5 blocks. Miami Heat defeat the Toronto Raptors 114-109. OKC upsetting the Phoenix Suns 117-96. And the Golden State Warriors defeat the Sacramento Kings 109-90. Steph Curry still out with an ankle injury. In soccer news, around the world, let's take a look at the EPL, English Premier League. West Ham defeats Everton 2-1. Tottenham destroys Newcastle 5-1. Son, which is like the South Korean player on Tottenham, had a goal and an assist. In Spanish football, we have Barcelona defeating Sevilla 1-0. In Italy soccer, Inter Milan defeats Juventus 1-0. And in France, big game, it was PSG, Paris Saint-Germain, defeats FC Lorient 5-1. And who scored those 5 goals? It's the big 3 on the team. Neymar with 2 goals, Mbappe with 2 goals, and Lionel Messi with 1 goal. All right, so that is the top 3 news going on in sports around the world with the top 3 world news. I hope you guys really, really enjoyed that. So what does that mean? It means it's time for the golden time. Yes, it is the golden time, a time for us to give praise and worship to the Holy Trinity. Hope you guys really, really enjoy this. We're going to start up with Wake Up and Rise, You Youthful One. And yes, when he says you youthful one, compared to God who's lived forever, we're all little children when it comes to age. Regardless if you're in your 60s or even your 80s, we're all youthful ones, amen? Yeah, we're young in this history too. So we'll start off with that, get our blood pumping first, and then we have fulfilled the purpose of love, and then we'll end things off with according to the Lord's will. So as one body of the Morning Star Drive, let's spend this time giving praise, honor, and glory to the Holy Trinity.
This Canaan history, let the sun that matters. Since we found the path of life, now we can say time can keep flowing away. I'm on the way to heaven. We have fulfilled God's purpose of eternal love. In that golden heaven above, from the sunrise to the sunset, even as the moon begins to rise, even as the stars light up the night, we should go on serving God, serving the Holy Spirit. You and I should spend our days like this. I'm on the way to heaven. We have fulfilled God's purpose of eternal love. In that golden heaven above, from the sunrise to the sunset, even as the moon begins to rise, even as the stars light up the night, we should go on serving God, serving the Holy Spirit. You and I should spend our days like this. Here in this world of love, we live faithfully, believing without regret. Life is great, meaningful. Life is awesome when we live this way. I will do your will, my Lord. It is all I know. I'll live only for your will. When you speak your words to me, I will act upon them perfectly. Oh, give me strength to act upon your will, my Lord, and let my thoughts be fixed on you alone. Oh, come to me and teach me, though I'm weak in many ways. Lord, come to me and fill me with your wisdom and your strength. me strength to act upon your will, my Lord, and let my thoughts be fixed on you alone. Oh, come to me and teach me, though I'm weak in many ways. Lord, come to me and fill me with your wisdom and your strength. You are right here with me, so I'll call out to you, Lord. For you walk by my side, pouring your power on me. If I act on your word, we will achieve victory. Lord, would you use me, and let's fulfill your will on this earth. Oh, give me strength to act upon your will, my Lord, and let my thoughts be fixed on you alone. Oh, come to me and teach me, though I'm weak in many ways. Lord, come to me and fill me with your wisdom and your strength. Lord, let me live for you and for your will alone. Oh, can't you feel this earnest heart of mine? Until the end, I'll never give up. I'll fulfill your dream. I will run with you together. We'll fulfill this history. I will do your will, my Lord. It is all I know. I live only for your will.
And that was According to the Lord's Will. I'm sure many of you here who were here in Providence when that song first came out, it's still a great song. But when Pastor Joan sang it, it was like so moving. That was during the Holy Spirit movement time. Like you could sing this song and get so into it that right after you're ready to just pray to God and do the best that you can. All right. So either way, there it is. That was According to the Lord's Will. Before that, We Have Fulfilled the Purpose of Love. And of course, Wake Up and Rise, You Youthful One. All right, so now that our hearts are into and understanding, our hearts are now a lot more spiritual after giving praise and worship. It is a time for the word study. And every single Tuesday we go into scriptures or we go into the Bible. And this week we did go into the book, the Gospel of John. And today I want to go into the story of who Apostle John really is, okay? And we're going to go into his life, the things that he's accomplished, what he's known for also, okay? So let's kind of get into who is Apostle John. Now, Apostle John, we know, is one of the 12 disciples of Jesus Christ, prominent leader in the early Christian church, and he was one of the closest disciples to Jesus along with James and Peter, right? So you'll see that John appears in more biblical accounts than the other disciples. Now, John is traditionally regarded as the author of 5 books of the Bible, which is the Gospel of John, and then it's like 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and then the book of Revelations. Although some Bible scholars will dispute which of these he actually wrote, but he's also believed to be the only disciple who died of old age, while all the rest of the disciples died were actually martyred instead. So he died in old age. And ancient sources may or may not refer to the Apostle John by several other names, like John of Patmos, and we know that because he was banished to the island of Patmos, and John the Evangelist, John the Elder, John the Presbyter, and the Beloved Disciple. So those are all the different names that he has, though it's really unclear if all or any of these names do in fact refer to like Apostle John. Okay, so it's also worth noting that John, the disciple of Jesus, is not the same person as John the Baptist, and that's what a lot of people do get confused of when they read about the two Johns, John the Baptist and they're not, right? John the Baptist was Jesus's cousin, completely different than the disciple of Jesus, Apostle John. Okay, so who was Apostle John, and what do we really know about him? And we're going to explore more what the Bible says about Apostle John and what we can draw from other ancient sources and the things we still don't know for sure. Okay, so excuse me. So let's just take a look at a few very, very quick facts. I'm going to go over some of them we already did. John is the disciple whom Jesus loved, right? And so when you look in the Gospel of John, the one that Jesus loved is talking about himself, right? And of course, him and his brother, it was James and John, both disciples of Jesus. They were given the nickname the Sons of Thunder. Right, you'll find that in Mark chapter 3, verse 17, the Boanerges, right? And the Bible doesn't tell us where this nickname comes from, and we're not even sure what it means, why they're called the Sons of Thunder, but some people refer to it to their speech, their tempers, or ambition, right? So, if you're called like the God of Thunder, and you have that type of temperament, then you know what kind of character he might have had. John, like we said before, one of the three closest disciples to Jesus, along with Peter and his brother James. And he's also considered one of the pillars of the early Christian church, along with Peter and another James, which is Jesus' brother. Okay, John was a fisherman just like Peter and his brother James, and they worked together. And before Jesus died on the cross, Jesus asked John, Apostle John, to take care of his mother Mary. So that shows how close he was to Jesus. Like we said also, that he is the only apostle that was not martyred. He lived to a long old age. And he is one of the prominent leaders in the early church. And many people claim to learn directly from John, including the bishops Polycarp of Smyrna and Ignatius of Antioch. Yeah, they said they were the ones that basically learned directly from John. And John has written the most books out of all the disciples. He wrote 5. However, he didn't write, like, if you look at content-wise, he was 3rd, right? Only there's Luke and Paul wrote most of the New Testament, right? As surprising as that is, right? And according to church tradition, John was ministering in Ephesus and was exiled to the Isle of Patmos for his faith, and then traditions kind of vary on how he died, right? So those are kind of a couple of facts, all right? So let's start off with, who is this John guy? Right? Who is Apostle John? So most of what we know about John comes from the Bible itself, particularly the Gospels. And interestingly, the Apostle John is mentioned by name in every Gospel except the one named after him. So according to the Synoptic Gospels, which is Matthew, Mark, and Luke, John was one of the first disciples Jesus called to follow him. And like many of Jesus' disciples, he was a fisherman by trade. He was a pillar of the early Christian church. So when Paul wrote his letter to the Galatians, a false teacher had told them that in order to follow Christ, they need to follow the Mosaic law. Now, this is the opposite of what Paul had been teaching them. And in order to prove that he was right to preach the gospel to the Gentiles and to teach that they didn't need to follow the law to be saved, Paul appealed to the apostles, particularly the 3 apostles who had most authority, which is Peter, James, and John. Now, Paul makes a point of saying that even these 3 apostles had nothing to add to the gospel he preached. So why would the Galatians listen to someone else and let some random teacher add the weight of the law to the good news of Christ, right? So if you look at like Galatians chapter 2, verse 7 to 9, it says, on the contrary, they recognize that I had been entrusted with the task of preaching the gospel to the uncircumcised, just as Peter had been to the circumcised. For God, who was at work in Peter as an apostle to the circumcised, was also at work in me as an apostle to the Gentiles. James, Kepha, or Peter, and John, those esteemed as pillars, gave me and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship when they recognized the grace given to me, and they agreed that we should go to the Gentiles and they to the circumcised, right? So that's showing that they recognized who Paul were. Like these three pillars were recognizing Paul as someone who's preaching to the Gentiles, right? So Paul refers to Peter, James, and John as pillars of the church because they played an integral role in supporting, building up, and maintaining the Christian movement. The early church stood on their leadership, and when there were disputes about how exactly Christians should behave and what following Jesus looked like, the church appealed to these three original disciples of Jesus who had witnessed more of his personal ministry than anyone else. Now, we talked about before the Sons of Thunder. That was their nickname, right? And we don't know what the names are. It's just Boanerges, right? The Sons of Thunder. What does that mean? And this is, there's only one place, like I showed you, Mark chapter 3, verses 16 through 19. It's the only place where the nickname comes out. And there's no explanation, right? James and John were brothers who may have had dangerous tempers, or it's often assumed that the nickname came from their thunderous nature. And the most prominent example is recorded in Luke chapter 9, when a group of Samaritans didn't welcome Jesus into their village. James and John asked Jesus, "Lord, do you want us to call fire down from heaven to destroy them?" Right? So that's kind of one of the examples of maybe that's what it means by the Sons of Thunder. And of course, Jesus said, no, don't do this. And he rebuked them instead. So, I don't know. Is this nickname tongue-in-cheek for their explosive personalities? Or is it kind of affirmation of their fervor and their fervor for Christ? So we're never going to really know. But we know that was their nickname. Okay? One thing we do know about John is John was part of the inner circle, the three closest disciples to Jesus Christ. And there are 3 times in the Synoptic Gospels where Peter, James, and John get to witness Jesus do things that no other disciple could see. The first one is in Mark chapter 5, verse 37, where Jesus raises Jairus' daughter from the dead, and he doesn't allow anyone else to watch besides these 3 men. In the second instance, Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up to the mountaintop where he is transfigured before them. Jesus speaks to Moses and Elijah, and John is one of the only 3 people to witness his glory. So that's the Mount Transfiguration. You'll find that in Matthew chapter 17. And then on the last one, it was on the night of his betrayal in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus takes Peter, James, and John with him to pray and asks them to keep watch. Right? So you see that these 3 major instances, very big things that happened, Jesus only took those 3, the 3 closest to him. And in these 3 moments, capture the special relationship John had with Jesus. And according to the gospel that bears his name, John may have had an even more privileged relationship with Jesus, or it could just mean that he's bragging. Right? It's one of those 2. So it's possible he could have been even closer. Now, in the Gospel of John, he calls himself the one whom Jesus loved. Okay? So John the disciple is never mentioned in his gospel. Like, so Apostle John, in his gospel, he never names himself by name, right? And in ancient writings, it was common for writers to omit themselves from an account or use third-person descriptions to disguise their identity. Now, in the Gospel of John, the author uses the one whom Jesus loved 5 times to refer to a disciple who is particularly close to Jesus. It appears in like John chapter 13, chapter 19, chapter 20, 21, and twice in 21, okay? And we know from context that this title isn't referring to Peter, right? Because in one moment, it says that the one whom Jesus loved interacts with Peter. And scholars believe James died too early to have written this gospel, okay? Because he was, James was executed in Acts chapter 12, verse 2. So the author clearly positions the one whom Jesus loved as one of the most important disciples, perhaps having the closest relationship with Jesus. And interestingly, with one exception, whenever the beloved disciple is mentioned, it tends to be in contrast to Peter. So let me give you an example. At the Last Supper, Peter asks the one whom Jesus loved to ask Jesus who will betray him. Right? That's John 13, 23, 24. One of them, the disciple whom Jesus loved, was reclining next to him. Simon Peter motioned to this disciple and said, "Ask him which one he means." Leaning back against Jesus, he asked him, "Lord, who is it?" Right? So in this situation, Peter is asking John, or the one whom Jesus loved, who's the one that's going to betray. And once Jesus is betrayed and arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, only 2 disciples follow Jesus to his trial from a distance, Peter and the beloved disciple. So while the beloved disciple pulls some strings to bring Peter closer to Jesus, Peter denies any association with the Lord. But perhaps the most well-known example of the one whom Jesus loved comes in John chapter 20 after Jesus died on the cross when Mary Magdalene discovers the empty tomb, right? So in John chapter 20, verses 2 to 9, Mary comes running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over, looked in, and at the strips of linen lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. Finally, the other disciple, who had reached the tomb first, also went inside. So in case you missed the 3 references to it, the one whom Jesus loved was faster than Peter. And tradition has associated the beloved disciple with John since at least the second century, but not all scholars agree that this is referring to him. So it's most likely him, but we're not quite, we're not 100%, right? Now, another one is, was he a disciple of John the Baptist? Now, it's possible that Apostle John was actually a disciple of John the Baptist before he started following Jesus. The author of the Gospel of John never reveals their identity, but there are hints throughout that it could be John the Apostle, and church tradition has accepted his authorship for well over a millennia. In the Gospel of John's account of Jesus calling the disciples, some speculate that the author omits himself from the story, as the author often does in this Gospel, while also suggesting that they were a disciple of John the Baptist, right? So you'll find this in John chapter 1, 35 to 42. The next day, John was there again with 2 of his disciples. So John the Baptist was there again with 2 of his disciples. When he saw Jesus passing by, he said, "Look, the Lamb of God." When the 2 disciples heard him say this, they followed Jesus. Turning around, Jesus saw them following and asked, "What do you want?" They said, "Rabbi," which means teacher, "where are you staying?" "Come," he replied, "and you will see." So they went and saw where he was staying, and they spent that day with him. It was about 4 p.m. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the 2 who heard what John had said and who had followed Jesus. And the first thing Andrew did was to find his brother Simon and tell him, "We have found the Messiah." Okay? So in any case, we know that John was one of the closest followers of John the Baptist's cousin, right? Which was Jesus, right? So we're looking here is it's possible that of the 2 disciples, one was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, and the other one was John himself. Now, did the disciple John write the Gospel of John? So in the final chapter of the Gospel of John, the author explicitly states that the disciple whom Jesus loved is the author. Okay, that's at the very end, John chapter 21, verses 20 to 24. At the very end, it says, "This is the disciple who testifies to these things and who wrote them down. We know that his testimony is true." Right? And if you read the entire chapter of chapter 21, you'll see that so it is the one that Jesus loved who is the author. So this is the only gospel that claims to be written by an eyewitness. And some of the earliest Christians claim this eyewitness was the Apostle John. Now, there's a book called Against Heresies, and the early church father Irenaeus wrote that the gospel was written to address ancient Gnostic teachings that were circulating at the time of the church, at the same time as the church, and Irenaeus specifically identifies the author as John the Apostle, right? And he says, "John, the disciple of the Lord, who also had leaned upon his breast and did himself publish a gospel during his residence at Ephesus in Asia." Okay, and Eusebius of Caesarea, known as the father of church history, quoted Clement of Alexandria, not to be confused with Clement of Rome, as saying, "Peter, having preached the word publicly at Rome and by the Spirit proclaimed the gospel, those who were present, who were numerous, entreated Mark, inasmuch as he had attended him from an early period and remembered what had been said, to write down what had been spoken. On his composing the gospel, he handed it to those who had made the request to him, which coming to Peter's knowledge, he neither hindered nor encouraged. But John, the last of all, seeing that what was corporeal was set forth in the Gospels on the entreaty of his intimate friends and inspired by the Spirit, composed a spiritual gospel. Right, so here it's saying that the Gospels were written. Mark was one of the ones that was given to, but then John wrote his own spiritual gospel. Could someone else have written the book of John? And there's good reason to believe that the Apostle John at least wrote some of the gospel that bears his name, but scholars still dispute his authorship. Some have argued that the gospel is the work of a later Christian writer who wanted to appear to be Apostle John. Others suggest it's Lazarus who appears just before the first instance of the one whom Jesus loved. Lazarus is the only person who the gospel explicitly states that Jesus loved. In fact, when Lazarus' sister tells Jesus that Lazarus has fallen ill, they don't say Lazarus is sick. They say, Lord, the one you love is sick. Now, it would be surprising that Lazarus was the author, though, because we don't see him until John 11, and we don't hear about him until John 12. Plus, the other Gospels don't record him at some of the events the beloved disciples witnessed. And it also, could also be a man named John Mark who traveled with Peter and is believed to have written the Gospel of Mark. But John Mark wasn't one of the 12, as the one whom Jesus loved seems to be, right? And other positions argue John wasn't capable of writing this, or that geographical errors indicate it could have been written by an eyewitness, or that since some of the earliest Christian writers didn't refer to the Gospel of John, it wasn't accepted within the church. Now, did John, the son of Zebedee, write the Gospel of John? We might never know. Right, but as far as tradition goes, the church at large has been mostly comfortable with attributing this work to him. And honestly, it's my favorite gospel by far. Now, did John write the book of Revelation? And the book of Revelation is traditionally attributed to the Apostle John, but Christians have contested this since as early as the 4th century. So John of Patmos. The Apostle John is sometimes referred to as John of Patmos, though some argue that John of Patmos was actually a different person. The book of Revelation is pretty emphatic that it was written by someone named John, and that he was on the island of Patmos when he received the revelation from Christ, right? And you'll read that in chapter 1. Now, in the early 2nd century, Justin Martyr was the first to suggest this John was the Apostle John, and since then, many Christians have presumed that John the Apostle was exiled to Patmos for preaching the gospel, okay? But even as early as the 4th century, some historians believe this was a different Christian writer named John who was close to Jesus. Eusebius of Caesarea argued that this person was John the Presbyter, an enigmatic figure who first appears in the writings of the 1st century church father, Papias of Hierapolis. Now, Eusebius was the first to distinguish John the Presbyter from John the Apostle based on Papias' writings. But wait, who's John the Presbyter? Papias wrote a collection of Jesus' sayings based on interviews with the earliest followers of Christ. His work is lost, but Eusebius preserved a large fragment, which included a list of the people Papias based his workings on. Okay, and in Eusebius's preservement of the fragment that was preserved, he wrote, "If then anyone who had attended on the elders came, I asked minutely after their sayings what Andrew or Peter said, or what was said by Philip or Thomas or by James or by John or by Matthew or by any other of the Lord's disciples, and which things Aristion and the presbyter John, the disciples of the Lord, says." So Eusebius interpreted this list as clear evidence that there were two different Johns. Excuse me, I had to sneeze. Sorry about that, right? Whoa! Okay, that's my second sneeze. If you're listening to this, please comment, God bless you, for those 2 sneezes, right? So, it shows here, by church tradition, as generally assumed that Papias simply made 2 references to the same person, or is it saying that John and the presbyter John are 2 different people, right? So here's Eusebius' argument based on the fragment from Papias, right? And he's basically saying that John is twice enumerated by him. The first one he mentions in connection with Peter and James and Matthew, and the rest of the apostles, clearly meaning the evangelist. But the other John he mentions after an interval and places him among others outside of the number of the apostles, putting Aristian before him, and he distinctly calls him a presbyter, right? So basically he's saying that, yeah, you see that they're far apart when in that writing, right? That it's mentioned twice, so maybe it's not the same person. Right, and it's worth noting as well, Eusebius wasn't sure Revelation belonged in the biblical canon at all. And he wasn't alone. Revelation was a tricky book for the early church, and people either ardently loved it or considered it scripture, or they thought it had no place in the Bible. So perhaps he had some motivation to distance it from the apostles, and later scholars have used this possible motivation to discredit Eusebius' interpretation of Papias, right? So other scholars have maintained the distinction as well, and they've dubbed this writer John the Revelator, John the Elder, John the Divine, and John the Theologian. All of these names are used to separate this John from John the Apostle, but it's a bit messy because these names are also sometimes used interchangeably with John the Apostle. Okay. Another question is, did Apostle John write 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John? And most scholars today believe that the same author wrote 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, but not everyone believes that the author was John the Apostle. So tradition holds that he wrote them all. So that's tradition, right? And that's a general agreement. And 1st John does have a lot of correlations in content to the Gospel of John, like light and darkness, etc., like the types of themes. But there are some differences in grammatical style, right? And those are pretty complicated with conditional sentences, demonstrative pronouns, whatever it is, right? So ancient writers have disputed the authorship of the epistles of John. As well, St. Jerome, the 4th century theologian who produced the Latin Vulgate, agreed with Eusebius' conclusion about John the Presbyter, and he went on to argue that while John the Apostle wrote the Gospel of John and 1st John, and a different person wrote 2nd and 3rd John. Right? So Jerome and Eusebius also suggested that the introductions of these 3 letters made it appear as though they weren't all written by the same person. In other words, John the Presbyter wrote the 2nd and 3rd epistles, but Irenaeus, who lived earlier than Jerome and Eusebius, references 1 and 2 John and claims he is quoting the Apostle John. So, what do we make of this? Some of the earliest references to the letters attribute them to the Apostle John, and church tradition has held him as the author ever since. So one can argue that he didn't write them, but there are strong counter-arguments as well. So in the end, we can't say for sure that he did or didn't write them. Okay? Now, question is, how did John die? How did John die? Church tradition holds that John was the only apostle to die of old age. The rest were martyred for their faith. So before Jesus died on the cross, he entrusted his mother Mary to John's care. And assuming John actually is the beloved disciple, when Mary died, John went to Ephesus and wrote his 3 epistles. Then he was exiled to Patmos for preaching the gospel, where he received the revelations from Christ and wrote the book of Revelations. And eventually he made it back to Ephesus and died an ordinary death sometime after 98 AD. Now, Tertullian, a Christian writer from the late 2nd and early 3rd century, wrote that before the Romans banished John, they brought him into a Colosseum and dunked him in a vat of boiling oil, and when he emerged unharmed, the entire Colosseum converted to Christianity. Now, throughout his later life, John also had some significant students. Polycarp, who eventually became Bishop of Smyrna, he learned from John and then taught Irenaeus. Now, John taught Ignatius of Antioch as well, whom Peter eventually appointed as the Bishop of Antioch, and Papias of Hierapolis learned directly from John as well. Now, a pillar the church leans on, okay? He was a pillar of the early church, and the Apostle John is a well-known gospel figure. Whether he was the one whom Jesus loved or not, he was one of Jesus' closest followers, and he witnessed more of Jesus' ministry than almost anyone else. And that's why the early Christian church leaned on his insight into the life and teachings of Christ, and why other leaders like Paul appealed to his authority. Now, centuries after his death, as the church deconstructed heretical beliefs, John's writings would help anchor Christians in their understandings of Jesus' preeminence and his relationship to the Father, right? So today, John's Gospel is one of the best tools for evangelism that Christians have, if not the best. I love this book. And passages from his writings have become our definition of God, right? And others have become so ubiquitous that even many non-Christians know them by heart. So we may never know with absolute certainty how much the Apostle John wrote himself, and we will never be able to measure the impact he's had on Christianity in the world. But this is kind of what the world itself, scholars have been arguing and talking about. So Apostle John, one of the most significant figures in the Bible. He is my favorite. He is, of the Gospels, that is my favorite, second being Matthew, but I really, really enjoyed it. It's a very, very spiritual book, but these are some interesting facts and tidbits that we should know so that whenever we do meet up with Christians or the people that talk about this, it's very easy for us to say, oh, I know this, and I know this fact too. Okay, so that is the word study for today. Hope you guys really enjoyed it. It's the story of who is Apostle John. Hope you guys really enjoyed that more than anything else. Okay, so that leads us into our song of choice for today. And of course, every Tuesdays, I missed this last week though, is going to be a Korean songs, right? It's going to be K-pop Tuesday. And I'm going to go into another old song that we actually even made into a Providence song at one point. We don't do it anymore. But this is a song called Fixing My Makeup, right? 화장 is a makeup. 고치고, it means to fix. 화장을 고치고, right? So Fixing My Makeup, very, very famous song. And they have this artist, her name is Wax. Okay, I'm not sure why it's Wax, but she got these crazy music videos, so moving and inspiring. And then of this song, there's 3 movie videos of this one song. But if you guys want to watch it, go ahead. I'll leave one of the links in the description to watch that video. Really moving music. But we used this once as we changed the lyrics to sing about the situation in Providence at that time. But either way, everyone please welcome Wax with, this is an old song, guys. Wax with Fixing My Makeup, or 화장을 고치고.
우연히 날 찾아와 사랑만 남기고 간 너 하루가 지나 몇 해가 흘러도 아무 소식도 없는데 세월에 변해버린 날 보면 실망할까봐 오늘도 나는 설레이는 마음으로 화장을 다시 고치곤 해. 아무것도 난 해준 게 없어. 받기만 했을 뿐. 그래서 미안해. 나 같은 여자를 왜 사랑했는지, 왜 떠나야
And that was Wax with Fixing My Makeup. You guys, if you see who, it's such a weird name, Wax, right? It's in Korean, Wax. But I'm not sure why she chose this name for her like her singing name, but very, very good singer, really inspiring and moving song, because it reminds me of what we were going through back then when we were singing these songs too. But yeah, it's if you look at the lyrics, it's really if you put it to the Lord, it's really, really inspiring if you sang it like that. But yeah, that was 화장을 고치고. That is from Wax, Fixing My Makeup. Okay, so that leads us into the final segment for today, which is my thoughts of the week. And this is something that's kind of interesting. I've been really, really working on my personal finances for the past, I would say, 2 months, less than 2 months, right? And I've been looking into different places where I can really be able to, be able to work on my personal finances, and specifically through passive income, because that is like the big thing that people want these days is, you have something set up where it's making you money every single week or every single day or whatever it is, or every single month. And you want to have this passive income constantly coming in so that, you're going to be okay. And especially for myself, is to run Providence full time, right? So when I first got into, this is something I think is very important, because we're living in the physical world, and because we're living in the physical world, we don't have, it's not like you can live without money. You have no choice at this point. And as someone who's a full-time runner in Providence, it's something I really think about a lot. And I started off, something very interesting is, I didn't know this until later, but I started this podcast because I was inspired, right, to start this, having something for members and whatnot. This was obviously not for passive income or whatever else like that, right? However, eventually, as you start getting into YouTube, you begin to realize, wow, there's a ton of opportunity, right, to make passive income from YouTube. So my very, very first project was making my YouTube channel. Okay, now my YouTube channel isn't a huge channel. It's not very big. It's not generating a lot of income, and it takes some time. I've been doing this for about a year and a half now, right, for my YouTube channel. I'm already monetized, and I'm making a certain amount of money per month, which is very, very small right now through advertising. So this is my first one. My first passive income was making a YouTube channel. Now, while making this YouTube channel, I made 2 channels. Well, the one that I'm making money from is not the MSD, is from the Espresso with Sky, and it's all through advertising. People, when you watch advertisements at the beginning of all these videos, I get paid for that if you watch like 30 seconds of it or whatever it was, right? And what happens is they're paying me, and it's not very much right now. I'm gonna be honest with you, it's not even $100 a month, not even close to that, right? So not even 50, but it's that first beginning point, right? And, it costs money for editors and all these other different things. So what happened was the MSD account I didn't want to monetize, right? But instead, that's why I opened a Patreon, right? A Patreon and a buymeacoffee.com. So these two become my two points of passive income, or streams of income. So my YouTube is my first, and then my Patreon is my second, right? So through Patreon, people are paying like, whether they pay like $30 a year or $3 a month or whatever it is, that is going to be part of my income, right? So that I can, do the things I want for Providence, but not be taking 8 hours a day on a regular job, or be spending 2 to 3 hours, 4 hours, 2 to 3 hours on my podcast, which is actually benefiting Providence people. And of course, my Espresso with Sky, which is benefiting Providence also, right? So even for me, I'm like, okay, these are really good things that are helping Providence and helping myself too, right? So buymeacoffee.com is for the Espresso with Sky, for the people who are not members. And then of course my Patreon is for us, for members, right? So I put like word studies and all these other different things on there so that people can gain a lot more from it too. So now I have 3 streams of income, right? So, and I'm not telling you they make a lot of money, but at least there's 3 streams right there. Okay, so my next thing is like, okay, what do I need next? Is there something else that I can do that can benefit Providence and also become a stream of income? And that became something like the Providence clothing, right? So when you look on every single video, whether it's every single podcast, just remember, this is just for members. Every single podcast, you're going to see it. There's going to be a link to a clothing store where we have Pravi members who actually do some of the designs. We all get paid. If people, if you guys buy anything, that becomes another stream of income. Is it a lot? Not really, right? Because, we're looking at a very small group of people that are actually buying this, right? But that's my fourth stream of income. Okay, now when I'm talking about I have 4 streams of income, it doesn't mean that I'm all of a sudden this mega rich person. It's nothing close to that, right? However, my next thing that I started looking at over the past 2 months, I started getting into crypto. And the reason I'm getting into crypto is because it is deregulated, which means that the amount of income you can make in a certain amount of time can be astronomical. Like 1,000 times, 10,000 times kind of thing, right? So we begin to look at these different things like, oh, okay, so what types of things? So you could do it. There's like long-term and short-term in crypto, and these are the things that I'm working on. And I have like these 2 projects that I'm doing right now on crypto, and these 2 projects are making me about $30 a day, US, about $30 a day. So it's quite interesting. I really, really enjoy it, and of course, we don't know how long it's going to last, to be honest. We just don't know, right? We don't know if it's going to last for this long, that long, how many years or whatever it is, right? But the one thing is, at the current moment with the projects that I'm doing right now, these 2 projects make me about $30 a day. About $30 a day, right? So I'm like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool because, I'm not sure how long it's going to last. But interestingly, it's not too bad, and I've been doing one of the projects for about a week and a half, and that's making me $20 a day. And then the other one I just started like 2 days ago, and that one's making me $10 a day, right? So that's why it's $30 a day. And there's these little programs and things that you study, and I am starting some other ones too, where it's just starting. So I've only put in money, but I haven't gotten anything out of it yet, right? But it seems to be going okay at this moment. So I am looking into these different things, and my biggest thing that I want to figure out is how can we make something, like how can I come up with a strategy for people in Providence to make passive income, right? So that we can run more. Like for instance, imagine, because obviously if you want to support a family or support a real, like you need to buy a house, all these other different things, right? Like $30 a day is not going to do it. That's nothing close to it, right? There's no way that's going to help you with that. But if you can make 300, 400, 500, 1,000, 2,000, like I talked to some people on crypto right now, and they're making anywhere from about 2,000 to 4,000 per day USD, right? So I'm just like, oh, how'd you get there? And I'm just learning off people. Obviously, I don't have as many liquid assets as them to invest in it, but I'm learning the strategies so that in the future, I would love to do this for Providence people, to find a way for especially my big one is for full-timers, right? One of the biggest reasons why full-timers struggle is because, we don't really get, we don't have like sustainable income really, right? And once we stop running full-time, like there's nothing coming in, and we need something to work on. So for me, one of my biggest goals when it comes to personal finances is to find a strategy in a way for full-timers especially, but also people who are not full-timers, right? To come in and try to figure out how to do it, right? So I am looking at this and wondering to myself, like, okay, what's the best way that we can do this? And I'm thinking of like even starting a Discord channel for Providence people where people can discuss and work on crypto projects or other money-making projects that will help people, which is minimum investment, right? Because, we don't have a lot to invest, but we'll have minimum investment, but be able to create eventually a passive income where people are able to run Providence freely without worrying about, oh my gosh, how about, gas is crazy right now. How am I going to pay for this? Oh, what about this? Oh, this is crazy too. Or people can eventually come together and actually buy property so that, other full-timers can live together and stuff like that too. So that is something that I'm looking at very carefully. and trying to figure out myself is what is the best way for, you know, to do these things, right? So that's why I'm looking at this and trying to figure out and understand it much better. And I'm hoping that this is something that all of us too will really be able to understand and be able to help each other in. So I am really considering a new Providence Discord channel. I'm not sure if you guys are interested. Write in the comments if any of you guys are also interested in these things. But I'm going to probably make a Discord channel for people to find out new projects and new things where, you know, I'm going to do my best to what do you call it? To research as much as I can, because, you know, nothing's 100%, but kind of giving options to people to see what is the best things that and best ways that they can invest and make passive income for the future too, right? And I think this is very important, with the goal in mind is not to just be like wealthy or whatever it is, but more so it is, I need this so that I can run more full-time, or donate more to the church, or whatever it is. Like, we need to have that purpose in mind that is far beyond money, or else it becomes too, what's the word? If it becomes too much about money, then all of a sudden it becomes too serious, and it becomes something where the goal isn't as godly as it should be. Like, we should be like thinking, what can I do for God? If I were to make this, what can I do for God? Like, even families who are just working crazy, just too much time into making money, but they still also want to be able to help people also. I think this is something that's very, very important for everyone also. So I'm thinking that, yeah, you know, I think it's something that all of us can really get ourselves into and understand at a higher level, right? So, yeah, that's kind of one of the thoughts I've been having lately. Is it does sound physical, but as long as the motive and the purpose, because the purpose is the most important part, is something that allows us to be more free spiritual, that is the thing that I think is the most important more than anything else. Okay, so that those are the thoughts of the week for me right now for Tuesday. Hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you have any comments, go ahead, post it below. I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking also. And I hope everyone have an amazing and awesome Tuesday. And we'll see you guys again tomorrow on the Morning Star Drive on 117.8.
It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly, so let's realign. Just listen and fill your mind.
I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can